Thank you for joining us, Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. So what is the value of your first-party data? After all, have you put a dollar figure on what is arguably the most valuable asset and greatest predictor for your company? Or do you simply spend so much more on acquiring new customers rather than on retention or upsells? Matt Freedman is the co-founder of Pearl, a customer data platform, and he's a subject matter expert at customer data and e-commerce. And on this episode, we'll discuss being an entrepreneur of a CDP, building a community around a brand, putting a dollar figure on your customer data, and the addiction to acquisition problem that so many marketers have today. So let's tune in to a CDP-preneur with a pearl of a shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. Please tell us a little bit about your background and your career and story thus far.
Sure thing. Kenneth, big fan. Thank you. Great to be here. And yeah, my background as an entrepreneur started in 2012, where I founded a golf shoe company that took loafers and boat shoes and converted them into to golf shoes. And long story short, we had a pretty interesting take on the way we were utilizing our own customer data and mining it and kind of appending it to get really good, rich insights about our customers. And fast forward about 6-7 years later, that little notion and that little methodology turned into a proper customer data platform. Go figure. So now we're here talking tech.
Well, what in the world made you want to be a techpreneur? I mean, of course, who wouldn't want to work ridiculously long hours, leverage your mortgage, feel pressure from savvy VC investors, give up time with your family, and all of that just for the chance to someday be a thousandaire?
It's every boy's dream with their poster on the wall.
Yeah.
Of the optimize leads and monetates. But I was my background is in marketing tech. I was working at a personalization company called Monetate in the Philadelphia area, and we were VC backed. We had worked with first round capital, OpenView venture partners, and a lot of really top tier folks. And I caught the bug and kind of felt pretty hard for the industry when I realized we were working with online retailers, which I have a passion for, and just the community of very smart, young, scrappy, hungry people was really what made me gravitate towards it, and had always told myself I'd love to learn as much from these entrepreneurs and these leaders at Monetate as I possibly could, in the off chance that eventually down the road I would have a chance to be in that role myself, and have been fortunate enough to take that path.
You don't like scrappy old perennials as opposed to millennials?
We are gender, and age agnostic here. So if you're scrappy and you're hungry, you're more than welcome.
So speaking of the brand you're building now, Pearl, the CDP company, what's the story behind the brand of Pearl, the name of the company? It's, to me, I think obviously in my own imagination, I based it upon your grandmother whose name was Pearl, and your fondest memories as a child were those days you spent with her as she gave you her pearls of wisdom while talking about unifying customer data and having a single point of truth so she could, get a clear view of the customers who bought her homemade Pennsylvania apple pies. Or did I just make all of that up?
That's a heck of a picture, and I'm going to go with that story moving forward, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'll send you a royalty check every time someone asks. We were kind of diagramming, very early on back in the day, putting the customer at the center of everything, and all these different bits of data that you had sort of floating around their profile picture. And there was sort of a resemblance of kind of that being the pearl in the middle of all of that data, and everything else kind of cascading around it. But it does turn out that my wife's grandmother is in fact named Pearl, and we let her know last holiday season that we will be naming the company after her, and had kind of a cool little ceremony about it. So,
well, she did. If she didn't get a grandchild,
more correct than you thought.
Yeah, if she didn't get a grandchild named after her, at least she gets a tech startup named after. It's every grandmother's dream. you know,
Exactly.
so we spoke offline at a Martech conference about this, but I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper. As an entrepreneur, what are some of the challenges you have in marketing your brand, and not only with just being in a now crowding CDP space, let alone the challenges that just come with any startup?
Sure. There are so many, and it's ever changing, as you know. And I think the Martech Lumascape at the most recent conference we were at last week eclipsed 8 or 9,000. So it's very noisy. It can be, if you don't have the biggest bullhorn in the room or the most strategic, it can be very difficult. For us, we're trying to be a democratizer of this CDP space. It's still relatively new, so there's
Mm-hmm.
education I think that has to go on still first. We're kind of taking the approach of just making customer data easy and fun, that you can learn from it and build just better relationships with people, and trying to promote all the things you can do, with that information. So we're trying to keep it lighthearted and keep it fun, because
Yeah.
it should be.
Well, then who are your mentors? Who are the guys that you follow? Is it the Rand Fishkins and the Neil Patels out there who've brilliantly done this over and over and sort of give out their knowledge from being a techpreneur, but who's sort of motivating and mentoring you?
Yeah, geez, there are so many. It's kind of it takes a village kind of a thing, and
Sure.
there's sort of the aspirational folks, and you look at the obvious ones, Jeff Bezos, and watching old Steve Jobs keynotes and trying to keep up with just the way they deliver and you kind of emote with the message. And I've had a number of I've been very fortunate, mostly coming out of Monetate and others, to have some really good mentors. There, two that come to mind. One's named Scott Samios, who was our VP of sales there, and someone I always kind of very much would have liked to have modeled my career if I stayed on that path. He's done incredible things in the startup community. And another one is Brian Head, who was a gentleman that I worked with at Monetate as well, who was my direct boss, and always had a very global kind of macro perspective on not only when you're engaging with customers and getting a message out there, but really driving home relationships. And this, although you're kind of in a role and you're promoting something now, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, you want to be proud of those moments that you've
Sure.
had with all those people. So it's way less about sales and way more about, you're in a place and time right now promoting a product, but if you can still have that relationship 20 years from now, the two people in that relationship may be in totally different roles, but
Mm-hmm.
you know so just a more humanized approach.
Sure. So generally, as a tech startup, what kind of marketing tactics are working? Which ones are not? I mean, hopefully, you're not going to be blowing your ad budget just giving Google some money by overbidding on the, non-brand keyword CDP.
Sure. They're getting very expensive, in
A
a
little
very
bit. Yeah.
short period of time, as you can imagine. No, we're definitely doing kind of the event circuit. We're really, I learned this on another podcast, and I think it was the old CMO of Pardot. I forget the gentleman's name, but you know, he had a great quote, and it was, "If you're not building a community, you're a commodity."
Oh, couldn't
And
agree more.
it was such a cool moment. I was listening to it, and he explained, way before they had a product to sell, they were building a community of kind of philosophically aligned people that just generally agreed with what they were going to be doing. So that, I would love to have that as kind of our keystone of what we're really driving, is let's just find engaged people that agree philosophically that you should be trying to humanize data and promote one-to-one relationships regardless of what we're trying to sell. There are people out there that are like-minded. Let's find them and let's exchange ideas and build this community. So that's what we're after.
You got it. I spoke with the head of the CDP Institute recently, and he said that a new CDP was popping up every day. How do you work on positioning your brand now to really stand out in that crowd? I mean, you talked a little bit
Sure.
about having fun with it and making it personal, but What are some of the things that you're doing?
Sure, it can be a legitimate concern for us, and like any other early adopter, first mover in a new market or something that's emerging, we're starting to catch the first growth phase of that product life cycle. So for us, we're just trying to stay true to our roots and our core. We really built our system to just manage the life cycle of relationships at scale.
Mm-hmm.
To just be able to be that kind of home that you can go and find solace in it, that your customers are in one safe place, they're being taken care of, they're being recognized when they level themselves up with you, and what you do with that information and how you market and communicate to them is totally up to the marketer. You can
Mm-hmm.
serve insights and whatever, but we wanted to take a very kind of a holistic, very natural, very life cycle oriented approach. Because the data stuff and the analytics and insights, machine learning, it can be very pithy and antiquated and very, kind of dry. So we're trying to expose and really promote the human element of it, and the personality of it. So
Well, then let's back up a little bit into the software. Then it's just us girls talking tech. So define, if you
sure.
will, what a CDP is and what the value of one is and can be to an organization.
Yeah, sure. A customer data platform, or a CDP, is really the intersection of a number of different systems. Call it a CRM and an analytics platform and a segmentation, or in some cases a marketing automation tool. Um, some of the interesting benefits that a CDP can have is, first, you're going to learn a ton about insights inside of your customer database, whether it's the value of your customer lifetime values per individual, the segment lifetime values. In most cases, the most interesting thing that we find can be, there is an actual tangible value to your database, to your customer base. And it's very difficult a lot of times to arrive at what that number is. But you'd be shocked if you saw some of the database values that, some of the folks we're working with as a function of their sales. I'll give you
Mm-hmm.
an example. You could be doing $10 million annually in revenue, and that might be the driver of everything, in the boardroom, saying we need to drive revenue 20% this year. When really, our mindset is that your database is the most valuable asset on your balance sheet. It's not necessarily the revenue. So to us, if we're able to predict, hey, when you started, working with us, that $10 million in sales also had a $10 million database valuation, where 2-3 years down the road, you may be doing 15 million in sales, but your database value may be 20, 30, 40 million dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to really hone in on the growth and the upward trend and migration of, loyalizing individual customers of yours, then your database value becomes much more predictable, repeatable as an asset on your balance sheet. So,
Well, obviously you have a passion around the process for this, type of SaaS technology, but why would someone have a CDP versus buying some other piece for their tech stack? This is a common question that goes on in organizations all over the place. They may have some sort of legacy, DMP, CRM, data hub, etc. I mean, why not build out your own, DMP or data cloud? All the Silicon Valley kids are doing it. What sort of made you, dive into the CDP world?
yeah, sure. It's really in the eye of the beholder.
Sure.
Every company has information sitting in different places and disparate systems, and I think the real power in whether it's a CDP or something else, to us, is anything you can do to unlock the hidden potential and revenue opportunities inside of your data if you just knew where to look for it. So to me, as a in quote, a retention marketer, a CDP is a really good tool to do some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone's totally different. What may work for someone who's an online retailer may not work for somebody in the healthcare space.
Sure.
So evaluation is definitely key, as you know.
Well, when you go in and give your sales pitch and talk to a lot of these brands, what in general, what sort of generally resonating with them and what's not? Where do you see pushback?
Yeah, we're having a ton of conversations right now in market, myself included, as well as our sales and marketing staff. And again, it's case by case, but the common themes we keep hearing are: first, my data is fragmented, and one
A
system's not
mess,
talking to another.
right?
Right. So we hear that a lot. The other is the segmentation bit, where people are saying, "This is really cool. I wish I knew how to cluster people better together
Mm-hmm.
to get more value out of my data." So that's another, kind of big one. And then at the end of the day, everybody kind of starts with the big question is, we feel like we don't know our customers well enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a qualitative statement, not a quantitative statement, but it is a very big problem. And that's another common theme that we kind of hear, stitched together among all the brands that we talk to.
Are the agencies weighing in on much of the decision process as far as you've seen or not? So many agencies are obviously really tied to the hips of a lot of
Sure.
advertisers out there.
Yeah, that's a good question too. It's probably 50-50,
Sure.
depending on the size of the market. As you go up market a bit to mid and enterprise, we do run into agencies a bit more where the SMB is a little bit more self-sustainable and self-service.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It depends on
but
the agency's knowledge of data as well.
yeah, and it helps us. We like working with agencies, in a lot of cases because there's creative power there, both from a content generation and from an ideation perspective, where a lot of times, you know, we'll derive an insight through our CDP for a customer. And it's like, great, we have a bucket of people we can market to. We
Mm-hmm.
have a reason why. We have sort of an assumption of what that can drive, but we still need a campaign. We
Right.
need to do something to promote, that audience. So agencies definitely can be very effective in that piece of it.
Ideally, is there a right size of a client or advertiser that buys into the idea and purchases a CDP? I mean, obviously they need to be able to afford it, but what do they need either in size or in breadth of knowledge in their own data?
Um, it's tough to say. It's still. I think the example I gave last week at the conference was still trying to solve for this retention thing.
Sure.
That's happening. It's still an $8 to $1 spend on acquisition versus retention, and uh, every single database that we come up against, there is a massive unfulfilled or untapped potential in revenue, just if they're, as simple as going from driving 5 to 10% of your zero-time purchasers to become one-time purchasers. There's so much that happens when you're making these very small, very calculated, graduations from, one-time purchasers to two or zero-time purchasers to one, not only in revenue, but predicted customer lifetime value and future value of your database. So there's very little kind of finite things we can do, or that a CDP in general can help you do, to solve for. But there's a retention problem out there that people aren't really addressing.
Well, and you addressed well the probability of selling to an existing customer versus a prospect is substantially different. I know you mentioned something about spending 800% more on those who are 1,400% less likely to buy. But I think, if you will, kind of go into your own term that you have, that marketers have an acquisition problem.
Good. So these are good notes.
Yeah,
I'm glad to,
well,
I'm
it
glad
helps
to
to
know
have
at least
it
some of
helps
those
to have
paying
your
attention.
iPhone at a conference and take pictures of slides.
Yeah, it's a lot of these come from just general, marketplace CMO.com or wherever the studies are being done.
Yeah.
But basically what we found, and to kind of quantify the problem of retention versus acquisition right now, is that there's almost this generation of a bit of a spammy, frantic marketer right now that is just being coached and trained to think that they just have to always have a bucket full of acquisition dollars to keep the lights on at the company. And that's not necessarily always the case, especially to the tune of spending $8 on acquisition for every one on retention. So the math breaks down, you're really 60 to 65% more likely to sell an existing customer, and you're less than 5% likely or probable to sell a prospect. So when you kind of break down the math, you're exactly right. What we're seeing is marketers spending 800% more on people that are 1,400% less likely to purchase something from them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's totally backwards.
So I saw you speak at that conference, and you followed someone you labeled as the godfather of the industry, the guy who heads up the CDP Institute and also coined the term customer data platform. And oddly enough, he had not seen Godfather 1 or 2, but that's a different story. So there was no pressure for you, though, in following him. I'm sure you weren't worried about heckles or jeers from him.
I was more concerned about what he didn't say than anything.
True. Well, Matt, it's now that time that the world's all been waiting for during our show. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I've been training my entire life for this moment.
Good.
I can't wait.
That's not enough training. Here we go. Customer data or prospect data?
Customer data.
As a man from Philly region, the Philly Fanatic, the mascot for the Philadelphia Phillies MLB team, or Gritty, the grotesque and creepy new mascot of the Philadelphia Flyers?
If there is one representation in the entire known universe of a geographic location that perfectly is the spitting image of its home, Gritty defines it in every single category.
Philadelphia will be so proud. All right. Number 3, CDP or OPP. And if you pick the latter, you're supposed to follow that up with, yeah, you know me.
Can I say CDP? Yeah, you know me?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Number 4, most famous person to call themselves a Philadelphian, Ben Franklin or Super Bowl 52 MVP winning quarterback Nick Foles?
Oh, geez. I'm going to say Ben Franklin had a moment in time. Nick Foles had everything else.
Yeah, one's buried there now. One would have been buried there had he not won the game. So,
very, very true.
And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, cornbread.
So, Matt, where can people find out more about you, follow your thoughts and leadership, learn more about the company, etc.?
Sure. My email line, contrary to many people, I'm not super active on Twitter, but I do check email relentlessly, so you can find me there and feel free. It is mfreedman@pearlthinks.com, and you can check out more of Pearl at pearlthinks.com.
Matt, good luck with your company and startup as a techpreneur, and thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today.
Thanks so much. It's great meeting you in person and great being on the show. Best of luck, and I'm definitely going to keep listening. Big fan.
So there was my conversation with Matt Freedman, the co-founder of Pearl, a customer data platform, and he's a subject matter expert at customer data and e-commerce. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, such a great point on anyone not only representing a brand, but for any entrepreneur starting a company. You've got to build a community of philosophically aligned people. I really enjoyed when he talked about the keystone of what he's driving, as well as when he said, let's just find engaged people that agree philosophically that you should be trying to humanize data and promote one-to-one relationships regardless of what we're trying to sell. There are people out there who are like-minded, and let's find them, exchange ideas, and build this community. Looking at your customers as a community and not just as people with wallets is always a better way. Second, so what is the economic value of your brand's first-party data? Companies should take a closer look at the value of their data. It's what drives so many of the decisions for your business. There's an actual and tangible value to your database of customer data and how that applies to sales and revenue. Matt even believes that it's the most valuable and important asset on your balance sheet. As he said, if you're able to really hone in on the growth and the upward trend and migration of loyalizing individual customers of yours, then your database value becomes much more predictable and repeatable as an asset on your balance sheet. Third, yes, marketers have, as he said, an acquisition problem. With an addiction to acquisition and acquiring new customers, we still spend ridiculously $8 on acquisition for every $1 on retention. We spend so much more on prospects than customers, when generally the economics of retaining or upselling to a current customer are so much better. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been an honor for me to spend this time with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. So if you've got a podcast addiction problem, then I hope you keep listening. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.